We have all borne witness last week to the deleterious consequences of racism. The most fundamental teachings of Judaism clearly renounce racism altogether, such as you shall love the stranger as yourself, or the reminder in Genesis that all of us, regardless of race, color, or belief system, were born of the same mother and father, Adam and Eve. Why, ask the ancient sages, did God create swarms of bees, prides of lions, herds of deer, schools of fish, and flocks of birds, but only one human couple? And they tell us so that no one can say to another, my ancestry is superior to yours. The single biggest question to consider is this: have we moved on? Is racism less of an issue today than it was all those years ago? The obvious answer is absolutely. 60 years ago, whites and blacks couldn't sit together on a bus. Restaurants and toilets were segregated. But that's not the point, is it? The hard fact is there should be zero racism in a 21st century modern world, full stop. It's not about progress made. It's about clearly not enough progress made. I do think it is necessary to stipulate, however, the following. The fact that we saw mayhem on our screens all week has less to do with racism and much more to do with opportunism. Many, if not most, of the rioters were anarchists who could care less about social harmony and cohesion. Demonstrating and protesting, absolutely good. Rioting and looting, absolutely bad. And those people defeat the whole point and purpose and undermine the bigger message. But that notwithstanding, the hard fact is that a human life was very deliberately taken. There's nothing that can excuse that in any way, shape, or form. It tells us that racism is every bit existent in a modern day world that has no place for it. Sure, credit has to be given to governments which have prioritized legislation against race hate crimes. It certainly makes people think twice before they might express any sort of racial sentiment. But really, what does legislation do apart from suppress something rather than genuinely cure it? Racism isn't some form of virus like polio that can be eradicated by social and legislative medicine. There is, after all, an ever-replenished sump of resentment that is always within us. In fact, you don't have to go to statistics for this. Anyone who looks into their hearts, honestly enough, knows it to be true. Prejudice is one of the principal constituents of the human personality. To be sure, there's nothing wrong to have pride in your own nationality and heritage. Englishmen, Germans, African Americans, and Jews, every one of them has a heritage. And there's a virtue to being subjective about your own heritage. I am especially proud of my own ancestry, of my people. The problem is when it spills over and it gets to a point of excess, when it's no longer about being proud of your ancestry, but turns into a lack of respect for others. And we as Jewish people know better than most what it's like to endure prejudice. And we therefore have a responsibility to be extra alert, sensitive, and responsive to it. There was a beautiful obituary in the Times newspaper last week of our synagogue member, Michael Goldmeyer. And one of the powerful points mentioned therein is that when he became an immigration judge in the interview process, he was asked, do you harbor any prejudices? To which he replied, I am the son of refugees. How can I have any prejudice? In fact, the prophet Malachi's cry, we have one Father, one God, created all of us, says it all. So society clearly has a lot of work to do to root out racist and anti-other attitudes in its culture, because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So it's not enough to talk about racism. You have to believe in dealing with it. And it's not enough to believe in dealing with it. You have to work at it. As a rabbi, I'll state simply this. It all comes down to one of the opening verses in the Torah. And God created man in his image. The two Hebrew words, B'Tselem Elokim, the image of God, is a concept embedded in men and women equally. But the message is far greater than equality between men and women. It's about the equality of all humankind. The Talmud makes clear that every human, as an image of God, is endowed with three intrinsic dignities: infinite value, equality, and uniqueness. We all live with the objective of striving to be in God's image. Our lives are all different and yet the same. If we all respected that reality, if you really believe that you are God's child about yourself, then you would believe that about others as well, because you know that God has many children. May we indeed know of an era where peace and harmony reigns supreme for all of mankind forevermore. Amen.